I'm going to be talking to Fred Ghatala, who is the president of the Advanced Biofuels Canada, about some new regulations in Ontario that will increase the amount of biofuels used in that province. But first, we're going to talk about a very interesting wrinkle to this story, which is that U.S. President Donald Trump, for all of his talk about how Canada protects its markets, in the case of biofuels, guess who is protecting its industry? Welcome to the interview, Fred.
Thanks. Good to be here.
I'm not surprised. The American biofuel industry has been subsidized and protected for a long time. Can you tell us what kind of protections the Americans have in place?
The prime the prime thing going on in the US renewable fuel policy world is the 45Z clean fuel production tax credit that pays an incentive per gallon of production on US made biofuels, which is then able to be exported. So markets basically have US produced product that is undercutting their domestically produced materials.
And my understanding is that their biofuels are mostly produced with corn, correct?
The We've got a very strong agricultural powerhouse in North America. The U.S. produces corn ethanol and renewable fuels on the distillate side from soybean oil and animal fat. But in Canada, we are generally more of a lipid producer. So our main feedstock for renewable fuels is canola. And of course, on the ethanol side, we produce ethanol from wheat and also a bit of corn.
Okay. Just out of curiosity, do you know how much per gallon the U.S. subsidy is?
So let me tell you in loonies and liters, it's approximately 24 Canadian cents per liter, which is about the average for renewable diesel and biodiesel. Of course, the one thing to know, Markham, is that with the clean fuel production tax credit in the US, it isn't a one size fits all. Every facility may get a different incentive based on the carbon intensity of their production. If you run more efficient, if you use less energy per unit, then you may get more incentive. And so it's not one specific value. And we'd say probably that corn ethanol will get around Canadian 4 cents per liter, and that can go higher if they're using carbon capture and sequestration.
Understood. Now, the Ontario government has come out and said that at least 75% of renewable content in diesel and gasoline, well, it has to be produced in Canada, and 64%, 75% in diesel, 64% in gasoline has to be renewable, has to be made in Canada. How is this new?
Is this new?
Well, has there not been some kind of requirement in the past? Have they bumped it up or?
Ah, so yes, the requirement has been 4% renewables in diesel, and Ontario has also had 15% renewables in gasoline by 2030. What's different, Markham, is that this takes the step of requiring that a portion of that is made in Canada. That is produced by facilities in Canada. And the reason this was put into place. And the reason why it was warranted is because of the 45Z incentive, which is exportable, which would have Canadian production being supplied to the market below US production supplied to the Canadian market below what Canadian producers can access their own domestic market. So, in responding to that, the government of Ontario took that approach of having domestic content requirements. Note, British Columbia did the same thing a number of months ago. They have 5%, 5% of their gasoline pool must be from made in Canada renewables and gasoline, which can be bioethanol, which can also be co-processed biogasoline, and 8% of the diesel in the British Columbia market needs to be from biofuels made in Canada, but British Columbia's blend rate is about 31% renewables and diesel. So two of the four major fuel consuming provinces have implemented made in Canada requirements.
According to the press release that your organization put out, at current capacities, Canadian biofuels production can drive almost $20 billion a year of economic activity. and support over 30,000 jobs. This is not a small issue, is it?
This is not a small issue, and these are all facilities that are built. This is steel in the ground. These are not business plans. These are facilities that have been running, can run at full capacity, and can immediately provide that level of economic activity. A healthy renewable fuel sector is fundamental to a healthy and viable agricultural sector, and effective regulations need to have durable domestic markets behind them, which is why the moves by Ontario and British Columbia were warranted and timely.
Do you think that the American subsidies were a threat to the viability of the Canadian industry?
Existential, no question. So this is a shift from what was a blender's tax credit, where Canadian production could go to the U.S., receive that tax credit. This is now a producer's tax credit that is payable to U.S. produced fuels, and they are exportable. Other markets have protections in place to protect their market from those subsidized imports. The European Union has those in place. This is just a new reality. Renewable fuel policies were enacted in the beginning in order to provide a domestic market for domestic feedstock production. This is what they're doing. We're kind of getting back to that. And so to see the Canadian regulators at the provincial level, and maybe in the future federally, do something that responds in this manner is welcome news to a sector that is frankly in turbulent times.
Is there any chance that in the not too distant future, the requirement will be 100% of the renewable content for both diesel and gasoline has to be made in Canada?
I think that trade is important and cost is important. We'll note that both the British Columbia and Ontario approach do leave room for imports. We think that's essential because we don't want the fuel markets to be in a monopolistic type supply situation. So this is not the whole market. This is a portion of the market. We think that that's prudent. And at the end of the day, having viable clean fuel production in North America, in Canada, in the US is all better for energy security. So we think that ensuring that domestic producers are able to access their domestic market is sound policy.
Well, Fred, thank you very much for this very interesting interview.
Thanks for having me.